Today's podcast is a topic that sometimes is very controversial, yet it does, seem to affect everyone at some point in their life. So it's masculinity in crisis, and I believe that there was a George Carlin saying, 20 years ago, Steve?
It was a long time ago.
And what did he call it? Was it the wussification?
With the P.
Oh.
I'm going to hit all of it. Yeah.
Okay. And so what happens is you drop those testosterone levels, especially over 25%. You don't have the male role models.
Welcome to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast with your hosts, Dr. Frank Williams and Dr. Steve Snodgrass, MD, FACS, where we discuss a broad range of topics without limitations. Let's get to it. Here's Dr. Frank and Dr. Steve.
Welcome back. This is the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. I'm your host, Frank Williams, and this is Dr. Stephen Snodgrass, MD, FACS, which is fellow of the American Council of Surgeons. Today's podcast is a little different. We've been covering a lot of medical intensely, which we appreciate the comments and the private messages, and keep them coming, and tell your friends, neighbors, countrymen about us. We'd love to keep building the podcast and see the community grow. Today's podcast is a topic that sometimes is very controversial, yet it does, seem to affect everyone at some point in their life. So it's masculinity in crisis, and I believe that there was a George Carlin saying, 20 years ago, Steve?
It was a long time ago.
And what did he call it? Was it the wussification?
With the P.
Of
America.
Of the America or the American male. So, but we're going to cover this from a scientific viewpoint, which most of it's all science, statistical viewpoints, religious viewpoints, because it all is a foundation on what not just America is built on, but what most countries are built on. So without further ado, do you want to start with the medical, Steve, or?
Yeah, this thing is, I think what I have is more of a science-based approach as to what goes on in the whole estrogen, testosterone kind of thing, and mixed with your thing about socioeconomic way of attacking it. So I feel when we put them both together, it will cover the topic very comprehensively. But I think we can just blend the two together, move in and out, and then we can see how that works. But to George Carlin's point, and I think this was really quite observational of him, which he was. But when he talked about how we through the years have just softened things, like during like the First World War and those kinds of times in that era, he was referring to what people had when they came out of battle and had mental problems, and it was just called shell shock. Right. And he just said it was direct, it was to the point, it was 2 syllables, and it was just like hit the nail on the head. It was shell shock. And then as we progressed, all we wanted to do is try to soften things. So it went from shell shock to post-traumatic stress disorder. And so we just kept complicating things and softening things. And his point was, when you do that, you take away potentially needed help. And just he addressed the whole topic, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And so that's one of the reasons that we kind of went into all this. Plus,
right, and we're not picking on anyone. We're just giving you the facts, the figures, the science, and some things we can do to try and maybe help get this back on track.
That being said, we can pick on some things.
And we will, as you know.
As we do. But the first thing that I'll do, just to introduce the whole thing, is that first and foremost, I want to go over estrogen, and then eventually like too little of it, too much of it, and then we'll end it like that part from my standpoint, because it contributes to the problem now. It's one of the contributing factors. But one of the things that I think that people need to realize is that a man's body needs estrogen to, not only, for optimal function, but to survive. So there's that. And when you look at the development of the male embryo, this is where it gets a little bit sciencey, but again, it's something that people can have a background knowledge of. But anyway, and I took this class when I was in graduate school called Reproductive Endocrinology that hit this, like, that's what this whole class was about. That was like decades ago. I went back and reread a lot of that book for this podcast, and it's still applicable. I mean, things have not changed. So let's start with the very basics, that gonadotropin releasing hormone. It comes from a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus, right under it sits the pituitary gland, which is at the base of the brain. So when the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, it hits the pituitary gland, which releases luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, and that hits the ovaries and the testes to produce estrogen and testosterone. So that's from the very beginning of how it all starts. So, you with me so far on that?
I am.
Yeah. So,
It wasn't quite long enough to get a nap, but just interesting enough to keep me awake.
okay, now, but now you get like, and in the male body, about 50% of the estrogen is derived from extra glandular aromatization of testosterone, and the other is from testosterone secretion. So when we get into the extra glandular aromatization, which is a mouthful, that's the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. And one of the primary things where that takes place is fat. So now I'll turn it over to you, Francois.
Okay. So, we looked at this going back over about a 20-year period over the last couple decades. And, one of the things, there's a shifting dynamics when there's social media, excuse me, which is 24/7 now, 365. There are, prevalent groups out there that may be 1/10 of the world's population that are being the forefront of bringing, like gender dysphoria to the forefront for people to argue and question. And even, you've got Supreme Court cases going right now for school systems, basically trying to influence one way or the other, starting from ages 3 and up, which is ridiculous. But one of the things I've been teaching now for 40 some years, and I've noticed that a lot of the male students over the years have, as Steve said, softened basically. One of the things, like when I was very young, I'd spend summers with my grandmother, and she always wanted to make sure that I, along with my brothers, were raised so that we could be independent. That just didn't mean we didn't need a woman. It just meant we knew how to cook, clean, iron clothes, sew. Those weren't considered feminine traits back then. They were just considered, you're more of a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well-rounded.
Well-rounded, yes. And there's a term for that too. What is it when the guys, well, never mind. So I was trying to think of the word. I'll think about it, pop it out, blurt it out. But, and then what came out of that is, like Steve said, more well-rounded young males, and without being what they consider toxic masculinity, which I understand that. To me, toxic masculinity is just bullying. If you're obnoxious, and that's been around since the dawn of time, you're a bully, you're a bully. You can call it anything you want, but it's just being a bully. Masculine traits are very important because, as the world gets more chaotic and more advanced, especially with AI and the digital age and everybody wanting to get their 15 minutes of fame on social media. You have influencers out there who, on both sides, promote we don't need women, and women saying we don't need men. And you can tell that in the statistics for birth rates, for the ages of people dating, which we'll get into all this during the podcast, for people who, procreate or have children. And there's a huge disconnect between reality and what people assume a lot of times. So we're going to cover that. But as Steve was saying, there's been a tremendous decrease over the last 20 years in the levels of testosterone. And I think the average drop, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, that I looked up, was about a 25% drop in average testosterone levels in the American male.
I haven't seen an actual figure, but I know this, is that the trend of decreased testosterone and increased estrogen is without a doubt happening.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
And it says a lot of that's, like you said, sedentary lifestyles, decreased physical activity, obesity, poor diet, chronic stress and sleep deprivation, environmental toxins that, that contribute to that. And one of the things we want to look at is what's happened to the traditional hunter-gatherer provider role in the last 20 years. Well, and we'll start there. So looking back over, and I'm just talking about the U.S., and this is probably equals out, by some research to about every country. But since the early 2000s, the U.S. has lost over 4.7 million manufacturing jobs. They've just disappeared. That's largely due to automation and globalization, mostly. Those jobs just didn't pay the bills for people. They helped form a lot of people's identities. Mm-hmm. And by that, a man would go out, work. Maybe his wife was a stay-at-home wife. Maybe she worked somewhere also. Or maybe she was a professional and he was a professional. But having a good paying factory job, it gave them security, comfort, stability. And it made the man have a sense of pride that, just like when you work out, you release those endorphins. So that was a strong, he works, he does his job, he provides for his family, he still has time for the families. And then we started getting more and more into, we've got to have more stuff. We've got to have the pleasure, popularity, possessions, all those different things. And what ends up happening is it's never enough. There's always that empty hole. So we try and fill that. And as those jobs disappeared, and people needed to be retrained, and some weren't able to be retrained in higher paying jobs because of educational or lack thereof, or skill sets different maybe by the socioeconomic region that they lived in. They either had to move their families completely away or just stay on unemployment and try and find something to do to make up for that. And so what ends up happening is that once those jobs are gone, once that's happened over the last 20 years, you have a large decrease in men feeling more like men. They feel like failures, which is that stress you're talking about, which also leads to, family strife, and can lead to arguments, can lead to, separations, divorces, birth rates going down, basically. Mm-hmm. So, and that's one of the big things that's happened over the last 20 years. Even when it comes to the point of, because men had more pride, and not saying again this is bullying, but men had more pride and exhibited and were basically trained by looking at their role models to have more traditional masculine traits versus non-traditional masculine traits, which is what we kind of hear all the time now. There's a new masculinity. There's a new, new way forward for you to be feminine and still yet masculine. And I don't, unless we're talking about lumberjacks, I don't see where that comes in.
Well, one of the things too that I looked up on this, and it's to your point, is if you look at something or some event or whatever's taking place, you look at what is the cascade effect of that. Mm-hmm. And so, and some of these things are measurable, and some of these things are not measurable. There's tangible and intangible things to look at on both sides. But if you take away a man's earning power, his identity, that sort of thing. If you look at, as you say, all of the problems that can lead to, including severe mental problems, up to increased suicide rates and things like that. So they're all playing a role, and those kinds of things are immeasurable what they do to society. It's just it's amazing how when your identity is taken away. Because for me, like, I will always identify myself as a physician, pretty much no matter what, because I've been around patient care ever since I was around 14 years old. So I always identify myself like that. And so people have the same kind of thing, how they identify themselves is basically what they do, whether that's correct or incorrect, that's the way it is. And so, when you take that away, a lot of times it's extremely detrimental, even to the point of, like you say, divorce, suicides, domestic violence, the whole cascade of doom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but those dropping testosterone levels, they don't just influence like libido. They also influence like the confidence, motivation, mood, resilience, and even lifespan. And low testosterone levels, and this would be your area, not mine technically, are associated with more depression, fatigue, irritability, brain fog, and low ambition, because modern males now face a dilemma that they have a biological erosion of those traits that historically were defined as strengths.
Oh yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
And one thing that I need to add for sure is that I'm 67 years old, and I was getting lab work.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I understand, and it just is what it is. But
if I make it there,
well, maybe. But anyway, my wife just said, like, there's a lot of men your age that are, suffer from this low testosterone and all that sort of thing. And she's saying, like, you don't fit that mold. I'll say that. But on the other hand, I really want to see where your testosterone level is. And I said, oh, okay, that's fine. So she tested it, and it came back 1,064, which is, what can I say?
I like a little caveat to the side. In your 23andMe history data, somewhere you must be Italian, baby.
I mean, all I can say is a man's man kind of thing. And then she just told me, when she said, like, I got your testosterone level back, and she said, that explains it all.
So now go cut the grass. You want something manly to do.
No, I just had to throw it in there. 1,060, plus is, I'm good with that. I'm good.
If you'd like to know his secret, he sells the supplements online. So, but it affects everything. I was shocked because I have 3 daughters, and all adults, beautiful young ladies, intelligent, smart, successful. But I said, and I've brought this up to both my church and other church organizations and even social organizations that are outside and more secular. Why do you not do more things to bring young people together? Like they used to have barn dances, whatever. I'm not that old fashioned, but things that socially they could be monitored. You don't have to have drinking there because alcohol skews everything anyway. But why don't you have things and functions where people can get together, more of them, and learn to socially enact with each other, and their interpersonal skills can improve starting, I don't care if it's in the late teens, and especially when they're 18 to 30, because a lot of statistics they're insane. Like according to Pew Research, over 50% of single men under 30 either have never or are not dating currently. That's insane.
Does that phone count?
That, and it does not count if you order something from Japan that blows up. 45% of men aged 18 to 25, this is the one that got me, have never even approached a woman in any way, shape, or form for a date. Now, if you're close to 50%, and that was as of like 2021, so I'm sure it's a little higher now. 77% of all women ages 18 to 30 wish men, I don't care how toxically feminist you are, wish men would approach them more often and initiate social interactions and ask them out on dates.
Yeah, well, along those lines, this probably doesn't have, but it does have something to do with it, but it's about the attitude.
Well, we'll get ready to cover that.
Yeah.
And as you know, Steve and I, not to interrupt you, Steve, sorry. Steve and I never discuss our research. We just work, as we do daily, as our wives say, we just go off the cuff and we just have general conversations unless we're talking about like art or blockchain programs and crypto and all that. We pretty much are on the same track on that. But otherwise, we thought it was better to always do our independent research, have our own independent thought processes, and then you can tell they just blend.
Yeah, and there you go. And I was at the Kentucky Derby one year, and anyway, I saw this woman walking towards her car, and the guy was walking towards the car, and he just went to his car and opened his door, and she was just kind of standing there, and so I opened her car door for her, and because
as a gentleman should.
That's what my mom and dad told me to do. My wife, ever since I dated her, she's never opened her own car door, ever. And I can honestly say that. I think it's just a gentlemanly thing to do. But anyway, so I opened the car door for this woman, and she said, thank you so much. That's just so kind of you. And I said, well, it's what my mom taught me to do, and it's part of being a Southern gentleman. And it turned out it was Bo Derek. And I was like, you know what? If I were dating Bo Derek, I would open her car door for her.
Exactly.
And so anyway, there's a reason why she was cast for the movie 10. And I don't even need to say any more.
No, I think that covers it all. But that's true. We're going to get into the traditional traits versus, non-traditional, more secular traits that are what they want the new masculinity to be now, and some of the cause and effects that's happened because of it. But when you look at why men are not asking women out, like you said, a lot of that's got to do with it's the rise of toxic feminism, and so a lot of guys are afraid they're going to be called creepy, they're controlling, they're very toxic, or the woman's going to say, you think you're entitled and I should just be, I should just be there, and that ain't the way it works in real life. But the majority of the time also is that when they do go out, they expect the man to pay for everything, to do everything, which, that's fine, because that's traditional male role model. There's a difference in feminism and, I can't remember that word, is it misandry? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Misogyny.
Yeah, but it's got misandry, it's just a different, that's why it means a lot of men are rejecting feminism. In other words, they're getting psychologically programmed to stay away from women because they don't want to deal with all the drama, the toxic traits, and then again to be called creepy. And I just think that and a lot of that's got to do with, hey, I can be a keyboard warrior, I can do this, or I can do an online dating app, and I can basically text back and forth a little bit. I don't want to actually physically talk to you, but a lot of times what's typed in on keyboards isn't always what you get in real life, so people have to be careful of that. There was another survey done in 2021 that was the Center on American Life that found that only 43% of Gen X men identify as feminists compared to 61% of Gen Z women. So when you're looking at trying to have men approach you as females, so this is for, this isn't just podcast for men. There are a lot of movements now, like there's the men going their own way movement, which is a big one that's, been perceived as a self-defense movement for men because they try and avoid dating or long-term relationships because they feel that it's legally risky, emotionally unsafe, and ideologically, got that out without my
easy for you to say.
Yeah, hostile. So they think, they're going to be dealing with someone who's going to have, an attitude, or, going to be looking that they should be the leader. Um, when it comes to looking at men, and we were just talking about this, about the traits, as Steve was bringing up the story about Bo Derek and him opening the door, the climate's being redefined for what a good man is, while still trying to not abandon masculinity. But a lot of that just doesn't hold, when you look around and see what's going on in today's culture. Core values for being a man is, integrity, emotional intelligence, respect and empathy, responsibility and accountability, humility and growth. Those are the core values that they look at today. Where traditional masculine traits were, physical, emotional, and moral strength, courage and protection, leadership, independence and discipline, and also with a healthy emotional expression, like stoicism, and duty and service. Those are the masculine traits that if you blend all those together, you are raising a good man, or you have become a good man, or you can work on becoming a good man. That doesn't mean you have to just, go to counseling to get this dealt with, because a lot of counselors, according to research, are okay with men becoming more feminine.
Well, it's all becoming more softened, because at one time all of this was looked at as a mental disorder, and then now they just keep softening the language to George Carlin's point, and to make it more acceptable, make it more the norm, and it's not. It's just not.
It's not. And we have a major issue. We have, the U.S. is looking at a $5,000, if that's true, bonus for people having babies, because of the birth rate in decline. And again, like with Pew Research and everything, in 1980, 63% of 25-year-olds were married. In 2021, it was 22%, and it's currently around 20%. That's crazy. In 2023, over 50% of American households were childless, no kids whatsoever. We're not talking about empty nesters. The average age for first-time mothers is now right at about 28 years old, with many having no kids or having kids before marriage. So the breakdown of the traditional nuclear family, and you can send me all the hate mail you want, there's a big reason why we have crime problem. We have cities in decline. You don't have those traditional male role models anymore leading the way. And traditional male fathers. And the next factor we're going to get into, which we're going to barely cover, because at some point down the road we're going to cover this topic in depth, is gender dysphoria. Because of the reduced, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the reduced testosterone levels, and I believe more estrogen, and I don't know if that's because of, it says because of, outside or contributing factors like the food we eat, all this stuff.
No, I'm going to hit all of it. Yeah.
Okay. And so what happens is you drop those testosterone levels, especially over 25%, you don't have the male role models. And this isn't coming from me, this is coming from science and, data. When you have all that and increasing estrogen levels, what you have is, that's one of the reasons. You can say what you want. That's one of the reasons gender dysphoria, has become so prevalent now. In 2013, the DSM, I think that's what it's called, Steve.
Yeah.
5 replaced gender dysphoria with focusing on distress, not identity. In 2022, the World Health, the WHO, which I'm not a big fan of, the World Health Organization removes transgender identity from the mental illness category entirely, reclassifying as a sexual health issue under gender incongruence. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's the correct way to say it.
Yeah.
And so you've got over 90% of all psychiatrists who believe that they're leaning towards more and agree that you should affirm this and we should help them deal through this. And instead of addressing the main traits and issues and trying to, work through that it's okay to be more masculine, this is the traditional roles, finding out if there's medical issues that are helping cause this. So to me, the research should show where over 90% of these psychiatrists and mental health professionals, they need some mental health counseling themselves, because you're not helping anything by softening, weakening the male role model and the structures. Now, I'm not saying everybody, counseling's good, it has its season, but you cannot sit there and continue to weaken a society and a culture down to the point where you don't know the difference if it's male or female anymore.
Yeah,
Steve,
I mean, for me, it's like, I've always had this kind of belief, and believe me, I mean, this is my own world. I mean, there are medical doctors, things like that, but for me, unless you've got some severe mental issue along the lines of, like Charles Manson kind of thing, I would tend to, everybody has their place in what they do in regards to patient care and that sort of thing. But when you see those kinds of shifts like that, or what's becoming acceptable, and there are a lot of subjective things there, and they're basically playing with things they shouldn't be playing with, in my opinion. And I would never go. This is me personally, and people can say whatever they want to say. I would never go to a psychiatrist, because there's no way I want them to put a label on me, because I would answer the first one or two questions and they would press that little button and have people come in and get me.
So we've got this fitted jacket for you, Steve.
Yeah, so it's like,
You've got your name stenciled across it.
And so I'm not telling everybody like, hey, don't go see a psychiatrist. I'm just telling you what my personal opinion is. And that's what part of this podcast is all about. It's my personal opinion. And my personal opinion is based on not only subjective things, but objective things that I've noticed. And unless you are severely ill, as far as I'm concerned, I would not get into that whole thing of being labeled by somebody who might be labeled themselves.
Yeah, I agree there 100%. So now I have had about 7 psychologicals in the line of my work in law enforcement, military. I will tell you that I'm either very sane or very psychotic, because I passed all of them with flying colors. Well, they weren't optional for me, but it just, I think my last one was supposed to be a 2-hour session, lasted about 20 minutes after a fatal incident. And the psychiatrist, it's the same one I had. Okay, Mr. Williams, what you were in the duty, this happened. Are you feeling? I said, well, I know there's about 7 of us involved, and my partner, who was a airborne ranger but also a law enforcement officer, we both went up the same day because they wanted to save money on the rides. It was about an hour and a half from where we were located to go up to the state, to the psychiatrist they had hired. And the gentleman said, this is going to be about a 2-hour session. We're going to make sure you're fit for duty. Normally it's 30 days. And then, we'll have you back and see if you need to be cleared. And I had done several of these, and he knew my stance. He knew Rich's stance, because what we always did was we were trained. And, I'll give you the shirt off my back. I would die for anybody in the right situation. But if you're going to try and take my life and you're having issues, that's not my problem. I've always dealt with that and slept very well. I've gone to lunch after those incidents, eat whatever, and not miss a blink. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's just not that. I didn't cause you to do that. The causation was on your end. The final effect sometimes was from either me or the guys I was with. But we were only into that session about 20 minutes. And I said, and you should not do this. And I said, I really think I need, a month or 2 off, because I'm just not sleeping. And for about a minute, he was very serious. And he says, how about you just get out of my office with a And he said, you're clear to go back to work. I know more than and cell phones are pretty new. Tells you how long ago that was. My partner did about the same amount of time. We were driving back to Dayton at the time, and we get a call on our cell phone, report to duty tomorrow. The rest of the other 5 guys got 30 days off of pay.
Well, along those lines, for me, I was chief of surgery where the hospital I operated for a number of years, and I had a patient who had, she was close to 90 years old. She had a life-threatening emergency, and I mean, this woman is a horrible, horrible surgical candidate. And the fact, like, she had a few myocardial infarctions, she had a stroke, diabetes, she, near 90 years old, and comes in like with, a bowel obstruction. And so you're going to have to operate on that, or she will suffer. She'll die, but it will be like tremendous suffering. So it's like there's no choice but to just try to get that patient ready,
right,
as ready as can possibly be, and then you've got to operate on her, or she's going to die. Well, so she ends up having a massive heart attack on the table. So she died on the table, which every surgeon just hates that, because they were alive when they came in and they're dead when they go out. But it was no fault of mine. I could not help. I'm operating on a 90-year-old who has a bowel obstruction. And when you get a bowel obstruction, you get all kinds of electrolyte abnormalities. Everything plays upon everything else in the body, and her heart just could not take that kind of stress, plus the stress of a general anesthetic, and it just the way it went, and she died. And then I had I was on call, which is why I got her in the first place, but I had 4 or 5 other cases to do after that one. And so the nurse comes in, the head of the OR nursing staff, she says, we have a hospital policy here that when a patient dies on the table, that the surgeon is finished for the day, because you're messed with mentally, and you just can't do that. And I just said, well, I've got 5 other cases I have to do. People are depending on me to get that done. And this was, again, to your point, I don't mean to be callous or cold. It's just, I'm doing my job.
Right.
I'm doing my job. And so I said, well, since I'm chief of surgery and I can alter policy somewhat on the fly, I'm going to go on and finish my day. And I did. And, I hated the fact that the woman died on the table. I mean, and the thing of it is, I knew her and I knew her family. So, that made it even more difficult. But, you just got to do your job. You just got to do your job. And if that's part of manning up, then that's just part of manning up.
It is.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Steve and I are not saying there's something wrong if a guy crying because of a funeral or a best friend or something happening, that's okay. A guy giving another guy a handshake and a hug, that's okay. People need those because they release those endorphins a lot of times that are positive and reassuring. There's nothing wrong with that. What we're saying is, the world's crazy and it's getting crazier. We need men to be men, women to be women, and we need young men to be trained and brought up in a more traditional masculine trait way, and we need for the masculinity to be a rebirth of, masculinity with traditional traits, not in a bad way. That means if you're younger and your testosterone levels are low, if it's health, diet, exercise, even training. I know in the South they used to have something called cotillion in the schools.
That's correct. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong even on our blockchain project, the Arnie project. Excuse me. We have a couple courses because we offer free courses on there and it's thearnieproject.com that will be released that are about addressing traditional male role models and traditional male ways. It's got nothing to do with going against women. As a matter of fact, it complements women. Women are to be complimented. They're to be cherished. but it tells you how, as a man, to do that in the proper way and to not come across as creepy. Like Steve said, even opening a door, whether it's a car door or the door, even if you're at the grocery and you see some elderly lady or another lady who's way out in the parking lot, you're walking out, got your groceries put away, and turn around and see her, could be raining or anything, and you could say, hey, I'll return that cart for you. So you take it, anything. You make people's day when you smile at them and you do kind gestures for them. And as males, it builds just a little bit at a time. It builds that confidence up, and so that you can start getting more confident, more secure in your own masculinity.
I would say give it a try every day. Just try to do something like that, and it does make a difference in your life and someone else's. And to your point about cotillion, this is a story I have about cotillion. That's when the female asked the male, and so I got asked to cotillion. So of course I said, yes, because it was a beautiful girl that I, was going out with at the time. So I went to cotillion, and anyway, this friend of mine, he calls me up and he says, hey, I got third row seats to Elvis Presley concert. And, probably some of the people that are watching this don't even know Elvis Presley. But anyway, it defines my era. But I'm going like, it's Elvis Presley. But I'm going like, but I've got this cotillion date, it's the same night. I'm going like third row Elvis tickets and versus cotillion. I chose cotillion because I gave my word that I would go. But then I'm just like, I was kind of lamenting a little bit, and especially that was his last concert before he died. That was it. Because I thought I could always go see him. So,
right.
But I've got this cotillion thing I got to do. And so I chose to do the right thing. It was the right thing to do. And, but then he was done, so it just was kind of painful. So there's my cotillion story. But I wanted to go over something about what you were alluding to in regards to working out, the whole fat thing. When we talk about, the extra glandular aromatization that takes place in the testes, skin, brain, bone, fat or adipose tissue, and it's crucial for estrogen and testosterone production. But I did want to say a special thing about fat, because let's just face it, I looked up the absolute latest data I saw was that the Centers for Disease Control said that 73.6% of United States adults over 20 are classified as overweight or obese. Now, they didn't break it down to men and women, but let's just say a very substantial amount are men. And so fat tissue is referred to as adipose tissue, and you can find adipose tissue between your skin and muscles. You can find it around the visceral organs, the visceral fat. Also, it's in the bone marrow, breast tissue, between muscles around the heart, as well as in the palms of your hands and feet, and also the upper back and around your vertebral column. So fat converts testosterone into estrogen, and so it makes it an interactive organ, if you will. The fat is an organ because it contains nerve cells, blood vessels, and it communicates through hormone signals with other organs throughout the body. And so serum estrogens have been found to be significantly increased in obese men. And, I can tell you, just walking around in various places, how many times have you seen males and they're obviously younger, but their appearance is soft, it's doughy, red-faced, just totally inflamed, totally inflamed. And, so much of that can be avoided. But if you remember the Saturday Night Live show when they talked about Pat.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Oh, I remember that skit used to be funny as.
Yeah, now they probably couldn't even do it.
No.
You know, it's because it's too offensive. But basically, you weren't sure what sex Pat was, and they played it up beautifully. I mean, it was really funny. But you're seeing that now more than ever.
Yes.
More than ever. And people can say like, oh, well, you're insensitive. No, I'm not. I'm just making an observation, and so is the rest of the world, because that's what's happening. And I just see it all the time, and I'm looking at it, and my wife's a pharmacist who deals in all this sort of thing, and she's seeing a lot of these people, and she's like, the men, like, when we were of that age, there just weren't that many people that looked like that, and now it's basically commonplace.
Yes.
Which is why we're discussing it right now.
Absolutely.
So, do you want me to go? I could go over why we need estrogen, why men need estrogen. I think it's important because I think a lot of men think like, oh, well, estrogen is a female hormone.
That's what most believe is.
And it is.
According to the research.
And it is. But I don't think that a lot of men realize that how important estrogen is for their health. And so if you look at bone health is a big one. And if men have estrogen deficiency, they have reduced bone strength and an increased risk of osteoporosis and bone fractures. And also, estrogen plays a major role in brain circuits, and they influence behaviors like aggression and territoriality, if you will. And it supports mood regulation, cognition, and is felt to have a protective effect against cognitive disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and so that is important. And reproductive health. I think a lot of people don't realize that estrogen is essential for sperm production and development. It also contributes to the proper functioning of the male reproductive system, including modulating libido, erectile function, and spermatogenesis. Concerning cardiovascular health, it influences lipid metabolism, as men with lower estrogens have higher levels of internal abdominal fat, and that increases cardiovascular disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. And it also will help regulate the body composition as far as fat, muscle, and healthy skin. And so I think that those are important factors to know. And this is another thing that's very important, and you're seeing it now. You're seeing this, is that about 97 to 99% of circulating testosterone and estrogen is reversibly bound to sex hormone binding globulin. This is an important point. And if you think of sex hormone binding globulin as a parking spot in your body, testosterone and estrogen are cars. When the cars are parked inside the parking spot, they're not moving, they're not doing anything. But when they're unbound, that's when they're free and then they're active. But when you have increased estrogen, you have increased sex hormone binding globulin, so the testosterone that's in your body is parked. It's not doing anything. So now, with your increased estrogen levels, you have decreased active testosterone, which is contributing to the feminization of men. How about that one?
I believe that.
Yeah. So
science is science.
Science is science, and it's like it beats ignorance and superstition all day long.
It does. And what I'm going to do is give a few final thoughts, and then we're going to do another version of this podcast, a part 2 basically, where we will cover even more, and I will cover most of the global, both secular and religious, not just factors, but belief systems, and how this overall plays into masculinity, and the world in itself, and the shaping the world going forward. So we will do that in the part 2 of this podcast. But for right now, if you don't take anything else away from this, I will say, not just in men but in women, stop shaming men for their very nature, and communicate with them. Men, start making sure you communicate with your wives, the person you're dating. Be open and honest. Have so that you build a strong relationship. And even as you're dating, by doing that and showing those more positive masculine traits, it builds a comfort and security with the female or the person that you're dating, and one day, even if it's the hope to marry them. And then what we need to do as a society, we need to encourage more emotional development, as far as emotional intelligence, when it comes to being okay with men actually acting like men, as people say. You can build confidence through actions, as Steve said. Just do a little something every day that shows your kindness and shows your masculinity without being obnoxious or domineering. And and if nothing else, seek mentorship. Get around positive role models, that are males. Make friends. Go to churches. Go to secular groups where they've got some positive groups. Don't get into some psychopaths, but get in where a lot of the more positive male role models, and do your research so you can make sure that you're getting in, or that you're being mentored by somebody that's actually a positive role model, and just not somebody who thinks that they are. And we have to also train ourselves that redefining what a provider means is multifaceted, not just an income. In today's socioeconomic world, women feel good about working. There's nothing wrong with that. Men, you can be a provider and still help out around the house, do things. Reconnect with a strong group of men. If it's just like my wife's uncle used to call it the Liars Club. Every morning they'd meet at McDonald's for coffee and just tell lies. For 30 years they did this after they retired. So just connect or reconnect with a brotherhood and get some guys together and just say, hey, I'd like to maybe, we haven't spoken in a while. I'd like to get 2 or 3, 4 guys together, and us just once a week get together, just kind of catch up, see how things are going, become accountable to each other, and just kind of share life. And then take risks. Step into your discomfort zone. Start talking with women that you normally wouldn't talk with. Make sure they're single so you don't get punched out. Start doing things. Start smiling. One of the big things I will tell you, and I see it all the time, because people run over your feet while you're walking, and Kroger's or Myers. As much as I mentioned Kroger's, they should give me some kind of they should sponsor the podcast. But when you're in social environments, put that phone away especially while you're driving. But if you're in social events, if you're out shopping, limit your phone usage and your technology usage. Smile at people, talk to them. It'll build a confidence in you, and it'll give you that courage at some point. You might be nice to some lady. I'll go for the Italian story. You might be nice to some lady and want to help her with her groceries, take her car, whatever. And she may look at you because you made that and say, my daughter's about your age. She's beautiful and she's single. And that's happened more than
you never know.
You never know. Don't miss golden opportunities, because kindness can have its rewards. You don't do it because of that, but it can have its rewards. And for this part of the podcast, those are my parting thoughts. And Steve?
I've got one parting thought.
Do I want to hear it?
Of course you do. and you're going to whether you like it or not.
Yes, I know.
But to George Carlin's point, let me ask this question, and I would like to pose this question to anybody who listens. Have you ever heard anybody say, my grandfather, he was really effeminate. He was just like, he was such a sissy. Have you ever heard anybody say that? I've never heard of it. Now, my grandfather, both my grandfathers, were just, they were tough men. They were tough men. And my brother told me this story that he was walking from my grandfather's house down to his business, and it was raining.
Mm-hmm.
Now my brother was like, probably like 12 or 13 years old, something like that. So it's raining, and he's got an umbrella, and he goes to visit my grandfather, and he's got this umbrella. And my grandfather says, "Boy, why are you carrying that parasol?"
Oh, why are you carrying that parasol?
Parasol's another word for umbrella. But anyway, and my brother said, "Well, Grandpa, it's raining." And he said, "So you're telling me that water hurts you?"
That's funny.
No, said.
They are a tough generation. Jim, I take care of my father-in-law who's going on 97, still walks. He's sitting out on the deck now, enjoying before it rains today. That old bird, he's tough as nails, always has been. He comes from that generation of depression and stuff, and, they don't have I don't know if I really would want to do that. I'm just afraid it might, I don't know, emotionally I can handle. No, they just did it.
They just did it.
And they dealt with it, and they went on. And, I don't see, and I will quote Bobby Kennedy, I don't see a lot of men his age, even, early boomers from before that to the greatest generation. You don't see a lot of them being super effeminate, as you just said.
Mm-hmm.
That just didn't happen. And so the world, was we were able to defend our country, defend our nation, our way of life, and we just need to be able to get back to that. So we need to show where there's strong male role models and they're able to, take care of business. And because I don't care how toxically feminine you are, or, even if you're a male and you're in the toxic femininity, whatever, I don't see where traditional male role models leading the way is a bad thing.
No, I just wanted to end it with the parasol parable.
Yeah, the parasol parable. Well, we appreciate you. We look forward to part 2 of this, and we will see you in the next video.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit follow or subscribe on the link provided so you can stay up to date on new episodes. Until next time, stay healthy and stay safe.